And today's Beyond the Dream, a look at the historical collection of Joel Freeman. He owns more than 3,000 pieces of African-American history, the oldest dating back to 1553. What's different about this story and has some oddity is that Joel is not African-American himself. He has turned his passion, however, into what he describes as a white man's journey through black history. Joel Freeman's appetite for consuming so much of the rich history of black Americans began in the oddest of places, the NBA, where Joel served as a chaplain to the Washington Bullets and Wizards.
The guys had their radar screens up and they were looking at me and saying, who is this guy? And so they started asking me questions. For instance, what part did people of African descent play in biblical history and extra biblical history? What did
you had basketball players from the NBA asking you about history?
Yeah.
Asking a white guy about history.
They're probably testing to see how sincere I was.
Why would a man who's from Canada want to be so concerned about taking a tour through black history?
Well, I think, first of all, what impacted me is that, of course, it was the Bible. And then also I began to see this as, I just wasn't taught this in school.
Joel takes the view that history is a gateway to bridging the divide between race and ethnicity. A small portion of his significant collection of artifacts and documents was recently on display at the United Nations. It traces the 400 years of the slave trade and beyond, with original letters from British abolitionist William Wilberforce, former slave and abolitionist Frederick Douglass, and chains that were used to keep slaves captive.
To tell the whole truth, we've got to tell the horrific nature of the slave trade and slavery.
But Joel's larger collection goes well beyond slavery. In his book and documentary, Return to Glory, Joel traces the ancient kingdoms of Africa, how they contributed to the world's development. It's part of his effort to help young African Americans to learn of their rich history and to help all people understand the dangers of racism. To achieve his goal, Joel had to overcome the lack of trust among blacks he interviewed.
I asked a question that changed the tone of every single interview. And here's the question. Do you remember the moment when you realized that because of the color of your skin, the rules are somehow different for you? How does a young kid wrap their brain and their arms around it?
Joel says his journey into black history has been an awakening. He is developing black history galleries to be set up at colleges and churches throughout the country to educate and inspire people beyond the dream.
People can come into the galleries, they can then be told about these ancient African kingdoms, and then now we're ready for the good, the bad, and the ugly of the last 4 centuries. But I don't want to reinforce the notion, consciously or unconsciously, that slavery was the beginning of black history.
Joel Freeman helping a lot of people understand black history and helping people live their lives beyond the dream.